Happy National Coming Out Day from the gayest, queerest room in my house. The 11th of October is International Coming Out Day, so this video is to mark the event. I was 18 when I came out of the closet. That was the roundabout average age to come out at the time in the late 1990s. Different these days, coming out happens younger, and that's a positive thing. I remember the day I came out for the first time. I remember the days leading up to when I came out. I remember having this feeling that if I didn't say the words, "I'm gay" to someone, I was going to explode. Like the pressure of 8 years of being in the closet was building up inside me to the point of eruption. It's probably difficult for younger people to understand, but you only have to go back 20 years to find yourself in a very different, very homophobic environment compared to today. The bigotry would come from all angles: the press, the TV, films, politicians, police, religious organisations. Different from how it is today, though with some politicians, police forces and religious organisations, the bigotry is hiding behind a smokescreen. When I became aware of my sexual orientation, the only thing that same-sex couples could do was have sex with each other and not get prosecuted. And even then, the age of consent was 21 for men. I also had no confusion about my sexuality. It was clear for me when I hit puberty that I was into men. There were no thoughts of, "I don't understand these feelings, what's going on?" I knew what being gay was. There was hardly any representation in the media, certainly not of a positive nature. But it wasn't like I was bewildered as to what was going on in my mind when I was rubbing one out. There was no internet back then, none of the online resources that are available today. There was the London Gay Switchboard, and that was it. A stranger on the other end of the phone line, hundreds of miles away. Not that I mean to discredit that service, but living nowhere near London just added to the isolation. Though there was the glimmer of there being other people out there like me. Even when in the closet, I never had that feeling of, I'm the only one like this. I knew there were other queer people, I just didn't know them. Something I would do very late at night, after my family had gone to bed, was go downstairs to the living room and bring up teletext, showing my age, and read the ads by Gay and Bi Men on the dating service. This dating service reminding the reader that for us, the gays, the age of consent was 21, 5 years over the age of consent for straight people or bi people in an opposite sex relationship. I would read the names of these men and their location and imagine what they were like in their day-to-day life. And at the time, that was the best I could do to feel some sort of connection. It was the best antidote I could come up with at the time, given the lack of representation on TV and in films, the infrequent casual prejudices of family members, and the day-to-day bullying at school. High school was not a good place for me. I have no fond memories of it. I was glad to see the back of it and the people I had to go there with. The bullying was a daily occurrence. It was relentless and it came from many people. And thanks to Section 28, and in all probability the homophobia of the teachers themselves, there was no one I could turn to. I had to endure the bullying with no recourse to stopping it, no one stepping in to support me, and because it was constant and in my face, it was the biggest contributor to me having mental health problems that I still deal with today. I would think What it must be like to be able to simply trust someone right off the bat without wondering if they're going to turn on me for being a queer. Privilege. The only difference these days is my, well, piss off then approach if someone does turn on me. At least with the homophobic bigotry of society, you could distract yourself from it sometimes. The luxury of small mercies. Another thing that was inescapable when I was closeted was I couldn't understand how people could be so hateful and have no empathy. But that's bigotry for you. The two things I remember when being an early teenager was I, and people like me, were branded paedophiles and told, you're going to get AIDS and die. This coming from adults, you know, those people who apparently know better. And they were punching down on me, a kid. I recognised it at the time for what it was. I took it personally because that was how it was intended. Looking back, it's scary to remind myself of how normalised enduring silence was. There was no way I'd be able to go back to that headspace now. There was also some salvation in Madonna. She wasn't the only celebrity back then who was an ally to the queer community, but she was certainly the most outspoken.
But why did they have a problem with two adults, two consenting adults displaying affection for each other, regardless of their sex? I deal with a lot of topical issues, what I think to be a big problem in the United States, and that's homophobia. Well, I think it's mostly abhorrent to straight men who are afraid of their own homosexuality. I don't think it really grosses out any women, not any women I know. And I think that two men having sex is erotic.
I think that gays need to have more role models, people who are in powerful positions coming out and saying, I'm gay. I think that would be very helpful.
It's one of the reasons why I latched onto her when I was very young. And yet it's only by chance of liking her music before I reached puberty that made me turn my attention to her. And I still love her to this day. For me, staying in the closet was a strategic thing for the period of time that it went on for. Yeah, there was an element of fear, but in the 90s there was no safe avenue to coming out at an earlier age. But in the latter years of me being in the closet, the pressure began to build up, to the point where it was becoming painful to stay silent. I also started to see a ray of light to me being able to come out, and this just added to the pressure of wanting the words, I'm gay, to burst out of my mouth to someone. So my gateway to coming out was when a friend of mine borrowed my copy of the film Beautiful Thing. Buying that film was my one gay thing to do when I was closeted. She saw it in my mini library of VHS tapes, showing my age again, and when she asked if she could borrow it, I asked her if she knew what it was about. Obviously she knew what it was about, that's why it caught her eye. So she went home with the film, and this is when I started thinking, this is it. This is my opportunity. A couple of weeks later, I was on the phone to her and asked when I would see her next because I have something to tell her. So she asked if it was something I wanted to say now. She knew full well what this was about, but I wanted to tell her in person. It was important to me that I told her in person. So the next evening, she's back at my house with the video. I'm playing Madonna's Who's That Girl concert on the TV to create what we now call a safe space. And I clam up. I've made it to this moment. I know I'm going to do it, and I know it'll be okay, but
I can't even say the word.
I'm gay.
I finally get the words out. Finally get the words out. And her reaction was perfect. There was no surprise, but then there wouldn't have been because she knew where this was going. I vividly remember the feeling of euphoria that evening when I was on my own again in my bed with my thoughts. The world was now a different place. The bigotry was still there, the homophobic politicians, the queer-bashing religious people, and all the other bigots who would be given airtime without pushback. But the world for me had changed. Also, when I came out to my friend that evening, she came out to me as bi. So my meeting other queer people happened much sooner than I had anticipated. At the time, just having said those words would have been enough to begin with. It's kind of funny looking back on when I was in the closet. How is it that people knew? I never told anyone I'm queer. I never told anyone at the time that I like men. There will have been mannerisms that people at school will have picked up on, that family will have picked up on. And of course, what I soon realised is that openly idolating a woman like Madonna, known for getting her tits out, is not going to throw people off the scent. Not with her. People don't just pick up on things that you do say. They can also pick up on the things that you don't say. My parents had realised my sexuality a couple of years before I told them. Or rather, my dad had told my mum that he reckoned I was gay a couple of years before I told them both. Coming out to my parents was uneventful, but that's really how it should be. It was my lack of showing any interest in girls that prompted my dad to realise something different was going on. So they had those 2 years to get their head round it. Once I'd come out to them, it wasn't spoken about afterwards. Me being gay was something that just was. Maybe there was some pain there, I've no idea. My parents have since both passed away, so I'll be forever in the dark on that one. They weren't the sort of people who would knowingly display prejudices towards someone. That wasn't their style. My dad wasn't religious. My mum was. But she wasn't the sort of person to weaponise religious beliefs. Plus, it would have been rich coming from them if they'd have displayed religiously inspired discrimination. My mum was Catholic and my dad was Protestant, and they were both from Belfast. Oh yeah. Society towards LGBT people is a vast improvement on where it was when I was growing up. It is by no means perfect. You only have to look at the treatment of trans people to know that. But the resources available, thanks to the availability of the internet, and shifting attitudes and laws, means that living openly and authentically as a queer person today is a more joyous and fulfilling experience. Queers are coming out at younger ages. Being part of the LGBT community is no longer seen as something that only applies to adults. Society is a lot more aware and welcoming compared to a couple of decades ago. It's a lot easier today to connect with others through online support groups as well as in person. Living in a more open society compared to the one I grew up in does make a lot of difference. And whilst we need to be careful online with who we interact with and what content we expose ourselves to, thanks to increased visual support from straight allies and solidarity from within our own community, I'd hope it'd be making coming out a more sooner rather than later experience. It does need to be acknowledged that not everyone will have the luxury of being able to come out. Not everyone lives in a free society, and I'm not going to pretend I have a quick solution to that, because I don't. And it also has to be acknowledged that even in a free society, there will be queer people who can't come out because of family attitudes or work environments. All I can say as a complete stranger is that I hope your situation gets better. Not being able to come out doesn't mean you are less of a person in our community. Not coming out may well be the safer option for you, and that safety shouldn't be disparaged. But for queer people who are able and ready to do so, come on out. The prejudice won't stop once you've come out. It won't. But caring family and friends will know how to be there for you when you need it. Barriers can be broken down when we become more visible. When I was in the closet, the only Pride events to happen were in London, Brighton, Manchester, and on a smaller scale, Edinburgh. These days, almost every city has a Pride event, and they are very, very popular. Very popular. Even Christians who hate equality like to show up to them. They just can't keep away. Facing prejudice when out of the closet is different to suffering it in silence when in the closet. When you're out and you meet other LGBT people, you're with people who understand what it's like to feel isolated. I remember not long after coming out, being in a gay bar one afternoon, reading an article in a gay newspaper, I forget which one. It was about some homophobic crap that a vicar's wife called Anne Atkins had been spewing. She did the rounds on TV, radio, and the press a lot at the time, usually banging on about homosexuals. But in that gay bar, on that afternoon, I felt something very new when reading what this person was saying. I felt unthreatened by her rhetoric. Remember that at the time, prejudices like hers had the upper hand, and this was the first time I felt like you and the likes of you can no longer get to me. You can't get inside my head like you used to be able to. When you are with people who share your values, share your hopes, share your outlook, and who know what it's like to be discriminated against for being queer, there's an inner and outer strength that you can develop, and I certainly developed it. This is why Pride events are so important. They're a demonstration of strength, they're a demonstration of people unifying, they're a demonstration of support. The reason we use the word pride is because it's the opposite to the word shame. Shame is what LGBT people have historically been made to feel and continue to be made to feel by certain demographics. Pride events are deliberately colourful, attention-grabbing, noisy and jovial, because that's the opposite to being hidden, shut away, silenced. In the closet. Pride is a celebration, but it's also still a protest. So, happy coming out day. Come out in your own time, come out on your own terms, come out to those you're comfortable with. And when she asked if she would, oh God, fill it. Stop.